So we've established a quorum. If the guests and visitors will retire behind the rail, we can start today. We're going to have our invocation, and to give our invocation this morning, the chair recognizes Pastor Omar Barlow of the New Covenant Church. Pastor Barlow is here today as the guest of Councilman Green. I would ask all guests, visitors, and members to please rise.
Let us look to the Lord. Father, as we govern for the sake of the city, may you give us wisdom. And as we govern, may we make a commitment to fairness, justice, and equity. And may we remember the most vulnerable, the children, the elderly, the homeless, and the abused. And finally, Father, we pray that as we govern, we pray for the peace of the city, that the glory would come in Philadelphia because you gave us your mind to seek the peace of the city. In your precious name do we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor. We appreciate it. Council Biddies. Thank you so much. And again, Pastor, thank you so much for those inspiring words. Our next order of business is the approval of the journal of the meeting of Thursday, September 13th, 2018. And the chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the journal of the meeting of Thursday, September 13th, 2018 be approved.
Second. Thank you. It's been moved and probably second that the journal of the meeting of Thursday, September 13th, 2018 stand approved. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, aye. Have it, and the journal is approved. And our next order of business is request for leave of absence, and the chair recognizes Councilman Heenan.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the majority, there are no requests for leaves of absence today.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Chair now recognizes Councilman O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Republicans, there are no requests for leave of absence.
Chair thanks the gentleman. This time I would like to dispense with the regular order of business, and I would just like to welcome and thank everyone who has taken time out of their busy day to come down to witness their government in action. We hope your stay here is a knowledgeable one, but more importantly, a pleasurable one, so much so that you come back again. So again, thank you for being here. At this time, the chair recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds Brown, who will present a resolution on my behalf to Girard College with Dr. Heather Wathington, and those accompanying her, please join the Councilwoman at the podium. And joining Councilwoman Reynolds Brown, we have Councilman Greenlee, Councilman Green. Who else? And Councilwoman Blackwell also.
How you doing? Okay. I want to say thank you very, very much to Council President for this special honor. On a personal note, my brother was an attendee, former student at Girard College many, many years ago, and I shared when we, at the inaugural welcoming of the new president, how he literally started climbing the walls there at Girard College, and my mother was smart enough to take him out before he was booted out. And so Girard College holds a very, very special place in Angela Reynolds' heart because it did leave an imprint, as he too was a young man without a father who wanted a chance to excel in an environment that was nurturing. And so I thank you, Mr. President. Honoring, recognizing, and celebrating Girard College for the 50th anniversary of its desegregation. Whereas Girard College was founded and funded by Stephen Girard to house and educate the underserved, but was limited to poor white male orphans per Stephen Girard's will, and remains so despite challenges well into the 20th century.
Whereas legal challenges were begun by African-American lawyer and then 5th District City Council member Raymond Pace Alexander in the 1950s. As a legal advisor on the famous Brown versus Board of Education case, Alexander likely anticipated a favorable Supreme Court ruling in that case, which would bode well for his campaign against Girard College's racial ban. Whereas, after making its way through the courts without hearing oral arguments, the United States Supreme Court unanimously reversed the ruling by the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, upholding the Board of City Trust decision to deny admission to 2 African-American boys, citing the guidelines codified in Stephen Girard's will. However, in an effort to circumvent the integration of Girard College following the Supreme Court's ruling, the Orphans Court removed the Board of City Trust as trustee of Stephen Girard's estate and appointed 13 new trustees for Girard College, effectively making the school a private institution. And
whereas in 1965, Cecil B. Moore Esquire saw his election as president of the local NAACP as a mandate for direct action on civil rights and a militant desegregation program that included Girard College. Unnerved by the race riots that had consumed North Philadelphia the previous summer, Moore promised to rededicate Philadelphia's civil rights campaign to improving the condition of African Americans, and hoped to use the Girard College campaign as an outlet for the energy and frustrations of the black community. And whereas Cecil B. Moore Esquire led 7 months of protests with a group of teens and young adults known as the Freedom Fighters around Girard College's walls, which attracted national media attention and participation from outside civil rights figures such as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., CORE's James Farmer, national NAACP President Roy Wilkins, and
whereas ultimately, through legal challenges filed by Cecil B. Moore, the federal courts ruled that African American students seeking admission to Girard College were denied equal protection under the 14th Amendment and concluded that they could not be denied admission to Girard College because of their race. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals unanimously upheld the ruling, and the U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear an appeal of the Third Circuit Court ruling, thus paving the way for the integration of Girard College. And whereas brave young men, Theodore Hicks, William Dade Carr Riley, and Owen Gowans III, personally took on the challenge of desegregating Girard College as its first students of color, and did so with considerable tenacity, strength, as well as grace. A special exhibit is on view in Founders Hall for the remainder of the 2018-19 school year, commemorating this history.
Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Council of the City of Philadelphia that we hereby honor, recognize, and celebrate Girard College on its 50 years of desegregation, and those early students that braved the racism on that day. Be it further resolved that an engrossed copy of this resolution be presented to Girard College's new president and all those assembled and those who fought tirelessly to desegregate the Girard College. This was introduced by myself on behalf of our president, Darrell Clarke, and sponsored by all the members of Philadelphia City Council. Bravo.
And the chair recognizes Dr. Wallington for remarks. Please.
On behalf of Girard College, we'd like to thank City Council and everyone assembled here and all of us who've been engaged in the struggle over the last 50 years to make sure that Girard College maintains its commitment to the City of Philadelphia. So we thank you.
Thank you. Council, be at ease. Thank you, and again, congratulations. Our next order of business is communications, and the chair requests that the Sergeant of Arms delivers the messages from the mayor to the chief clerk. Mr. Decker, please read those messages.
To the President and members of the Council of the City of Philadelphia, I am pleased to advise you that on September 14, 2018, I signed the following bill, which was passed by Council at its session on September 13, 2018, Bill number 180552. And that on September 19, 2018, I signed the following bills, which were passed by Council at its session on September 13, 2018, Bill numbers 180555 and 180603.
Is that it? Great. All right, those messages will be printed in the journal. Mr. Decker, you have any additional communications?
I have none, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, sir. And our next order of business is the introduction of bills and resolutions, and the chair recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Morning.
I offer 2 resolutions this morning.
Thank you.
A privilege resolution recognizing Le Chapeau Project and its artists on the occasion of their one-day art gallery showcasing international artists and challenging the negative narrative surrounding immigrants and individuals from Africa, Asia, and the Americas.
And that will be on today's calendar.
And a privilege resolution authorizing the Committee on Children and Youth to hold public hearings examining the prevalence of child hunger in Philadelphia and evaluating the efficacy of existing programs addressing child hunger.
Today's calendar, chair recognizes Councilwoman Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today I introduce one bill.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you.
An ordinance amending Section 9206 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Sidewalk Vendors in Neighborhood Business Districts by adding a designated vendor location in the University City District.
Referred to committee, and the chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today I offer 4 bills and 2 resolutions. The bills and one of the resolutions are on your behalf.
Thank you, Councilman. Yeah.
An ordinance establishing parking regulations in the vicinity of 20th and Brown Street, Bouvier Street and Montgomery Avenue, 28th Street and Cecil B. Moore Avenue, 23rd Street and Parrish Street, Mount Vernon Street and 11th Street, Harper Street and 29th Street, Brown Street and 23rd Street. And an ordinance establishing parking regulations in the vicinity of Thompson Street and Crease Street and Girard Avenue, Hancock Street and Girard Avenue, Marlborough Street and Wildey Street, Belgrade Street and Crease Street, Girard Avenue and Frankfurt Avenue, Day Street and Thompson Street. And an ordinance establishing parking regulations in the vicinity of 16th Street and Oxford Street, Aspern Street and 25th Street and 23rd Street, Aspen Street and 24th Street. And an ordinance providing for the submission to the qualified electors of the City of Philadelphia of the proposal set forth in a resolution approved by Council proposing an amendment to the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter relating to the mandatory establishment and hiring of a new class of employees within the civil service system to be designated as public safety enforcement officers, setting forth the duties of such employees and authorizing the appropriate officers to publish notice and to make arrangements for the special election.
Those 4 bills just read by the chief clerk will be referred to the appropriate committees.
And a privilege resolution declaring October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Today's calendar,
And a non-privileged resolution proposing an amendment to the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter providing for the mandatory establishment and hiring of a new class of employees within the civil service system to be designated as public safety enforcement officers.
and that will be referred to committee. Chair recognizes Councilman Heenan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no bills or resolutions today.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. One bill.
Thank you, Councilman.
An ordinance legalizing an existing patio encroachment at 3749 through 51 Midvale Avenue.
Referred to committee. And Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. I have 2 resolutions.
Thank you, Councilman.
A privilege resolution honoring and recognizing diversified community services on the 50th anniversary of its incorporation for the organization's dedication to improving the South Philadelphia community through education and economic empowerment.
Today's calendar,
And a non-privileged resolution also naming the 2300 block of Ellsworth Street, Patty Jackson Way.
and that will be on next week's calendar. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Kiona Sanchez.
Thank you, Council President. I have one privilege resolution.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
A privilege resolution declaring September 15, 2018 through October 15, 2018 as Hispanic Heritage Month here in the city of Philadelphia to honor the role that Hispanics have played and continue to play in the economic, cultural, and social development of our city and nation.
Today's calendar, Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Council President. Before I introduce today's legislation, I would like to acknowledge some students from the city's best law school, Temple Law School. We have some students here from the Law and Public Policy Scholars Program. If they could rise. Council President, I have one bill and one non-privileged resolution.
Thank you, Councilman.
An ordinance providing for the submission to the qualified electors of the City of Philadelphia of an amendment to the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter to change certain gender-specific references to gender-neutral references as approved by resolution of the City Council.
For the committee,
And a non-privileged resolution proposing an amendment to the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter to change certain gender-specific references such as councilman, councilmen, and councilmanic to gender-neutral references such as council member, council members, and council, and providing for the submission of the proposed amendment to the electors of the City of Philadelphia.
also referred to committee. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have one resolution co-sponsored by yourself along with members Greenlee, Jones, Reynolds Brown, and Dom.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
A privileged resolution honoring and recognizing the men and women of First Builders Incorporated for their commitment to building a new pathway to viable careers in the construction industry for the City of Philadelphia's next generation of working men and women and labor leaders.
And that'll be on today's calendar. Chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Morning, Council President. I have one bill today.
Thank you, Councilman.
An ordinance amending Section 22.310 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Deferred Retirement Option Plan with respect to eligibility of new employees.
And that will be referred to the appropriate committee. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gimm.
Good morning, Council President. I have no bills or resolutions today.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Topmanberger.
Good morning, Council President. I have one bill today.
Thank you, Councilman.
An ordinance amending Section 12.1300 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Enforcement and Obedience to Traffic Regulations by increasing the associated penalty for violating this section.
And that will be referred to committee. Chair recognizes Councilman O'Neill.
I'm sorry. I have no bills or resolutions.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer four bills.
Thank you, Councilman.
An ordinance authorizing Anthony Deloy to construct on and maintain a proposed exterior stairway encroachment at 2573 Tulip Street. And an ordinance authorizing James Mahan to install, own, and maintain an open-air sidewalk cafe at 2546 East Lehigh Avenue. And an ordinance authorizing Fishtown Brew Pub to install, own, and maintain an open-air sidewalk cafe at 1101 Frankfurt Avenue. And an ordinance authorizing Pico Energy Company to construct, own, and maintain proposed non-standard bollard encroachments at 900 through 22 Lombard Street.
Those four bills just read by the Chief Clerk will be referred to the appropriate committees. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Bass.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman O.
Thank you, Council President. I offer one privilege resolution co-sponsored by Council members Heenan, Green, Tallberger, and Squilla.
Thank you, Councilman.
A privilege resolution recognizing and celebrating the Band of Brothers family reunion in Philadelphia.
And that will be on this week's calendar. That concludes our introduction of bills and resolutions, and the chair recognizes Councilwoman Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I neglected to introduce some young people from Penn who came to us as guests of Anjali Chinani, who works for the mayor. You all remember Anjali. The mayor and I were in her wedding year. She's working on her PhD. They're all PhD students working on issues like public policy and planning, and I would appreciate you recognizing them at this time.
Thank you. Where
They're
they
here.
Please stand up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Welcome. Our next order of business is the reports from committee, and the chair recognizes Councilwoman Kiona Sanchez for a report from the Committee of License and Inspection.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Licenses and Inspections reports one bill with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Mr. Decker, please read the report.
To the President and members of the Council of the City of Philadelphia, the Committee on Licenses and Inspections, to which is referred Bill Number 160151, entitled, An Ordinance Amending the Philadelphia Code by adding a new provision authorizing the City of Philadelphia to issue municipal identification cards to city residents establishing standards, confidentiality provisions, and other related items regarding the cards. Respectful reports it has considered and amended the same and returns the attached bill to council with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you. Chair again recognizes Councilwoman Keona Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules of council be suspended as to permit first reading of this day of Bill Number 1660151.
Thank you. It has been moved and properly seconded that the rules of council be suspended so as to permit first reading this day of bills number 160-151. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. And the bill will be placed on our first reading calendar today. And our next order of business is consideration of the calendar. I note that the bill just reported from committee with suspension of the rules has been deemed to have had a first reading. This bill will be on our second reading and final passage calendar at our next session of council. As there are no additional bills on the first reading calendar today, the chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee for the purpose of calling up the resolutions and bills on the second reading and final passage.
Thank you, Mr. President. The following resolutions and bills are being called up from the second reading and final passage calendar today. Numbers 180756, 180761, 180763, 180764, 180768, 180769, 180775, 180776, 180784, 180600A, 180077A, 180498A. All other resolutions and bills are being held.
Thank you. Before considering the bills and resolutions today that are on the final passage, we'll have to have our public comment session. It will go as follows. If you haven't already signed up for a bill or resolution that's on the final passage calendar today, you may sign up at the table to my left. When your name is called, you go to the middle of the council chambers. There's a podium. There's a device on that podium. When the light turns green, it will be your time to speak. When the light turns yellow, you will have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. When the light turns red, we'd ask that you please adhere to the guidelines to conclude your remarks. I believe the calendar public comment may be somewhat lengthy today, so we're really asking you to cooperate with respect to those particular guidelines and take your 3 minutes. So, Mr. Decker, are we ready for the first name? You'll have 3 minutes to conclude your remarks. Okay?
Kathleen McGettigan. Kathleen McGettigan. Commenting on 180100.
Two things. I was very embarrassed last week at the first meeting of City Council after summer break. I'm really glad that Frederick Wiseman, the documentary filmmaker, wasn't here with his camera, because if he had been here and he had portrayed on film how City Council behaved, how they came in 2 hours late and they clowned around posing for selfies, I think that there would be people on the banks of the Limpopo River in Africa, there would be Siberian villagers who, after watching Boris Johnson's bad hair day, would be laughing themselves silly at the antics of City Council. And I'm also very upset because I would like to see City Council introduce Bill, I believe, 180100 regarding the Alpha Center, because, I mean, stop trying to wear people down. Introduce it and vote it up or down. Finally, you know, excuse me, have some intestinal fortitude. Finally, I would like to say that I believe it is 1 year now since the anniversary of Hurricane Maria. And as we all know, about a little less than 3,000 people died in 9/11. Well, it seems that the latest figures say that about 3,000 Puerto Ricans perished. Some died slow, lingering, painful deaths due to cancer, or drinking dirty water, or not being able to get kidney dialysis. Well, since we have the second largest Puerto Rican population outside of Puerto Rico, and since 8% of the Philadelphia population is Puerto Rican, and since I saw City Council do things like memorizing Art Appreciation Week and memorizing athletes who've been dead for maybe 20 years last week, it seems like maybe we should have a moment of recognition for the Puerto Ricans who perished during Hurricane Maria. That's
Thank
it.
you.
Stanley Starter.
Yes, Councilwoman.
Thank you. I hope that you will allow, I know we have a few more people and than perhaps we could have. This is such a special issue, and we have leaders from not only our city and state, but our country and abroad. So I hope that you will allow them and all of those who are here for Bill number 180761 about the creating a special committee on 400 years of African American history. I hope that they will now come forward and take a few minutes to say
Sure.
what they want to say.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you, Mr. Lopez, can you help them, just
The committee?
the individuals who are
Please
speaking
come
on
forward.
that?
I would just briefly say thank you very much for this opportunity for Council Lady Blackwell and all City Council endorsing the 400-year commemoration of free Africans being enslaved in the United States. And we have scholars and activists here, beginning with Dr. Malefi Asante, Dr. Diane Turner, the president of the African American Museum in Philadelphia, and many others that are here to speak your remarks. So thank you. I will yield my time to Dr.
Thank you, Mr. Schroeder.
Mr. President, members of the City Council, I rise in the name...
Just state your name for the record, please, Doctor.
I'm Malefi Kete Asante.
Thank you.
Chair of the Department of Africology at Temple University. I rise in the name of the 20 Africans who landed in Point Comfort, Virginia, near Jamestown in 1619 to support the resolution for the Special Commission for the commemoration of 400 years of African presence here. I rise in the name of the more than 100 African ethnic groups and nations, Bamileke, Fulani, Ewe, Asante, Fanti, Wolof, Mandinka, Congo, Ga, who came to this country not as slaves, but as persons, as African people who were later enslaved in America. I rise to support this resolution in the name of the Africans who experienced the brutal dispossession and disempowerment that came with the enslavement itself, and those who died on the slave ships and whose bodies were buried in the oceans to energize those oceans. I rise in their name and in the names of those who were resilient and who lived through the suffering of segregation and discrimination in America, and like my ancestors in Georgia who picked cotton and worked in the tobacco fields. I rise in their names to support this special commission for 400 years. And I rise also in the names of those who became scientists and poets because of the work that their ancestors have done. And I support this special resolution, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. President and Council. My name is Professor
Doctor
Walter Palmer.
Doctor, hold on 1 second. We have this one because we have a list here.
Yes.
Stan, we're going to go by the list or by Councilwoman Howard? I know, but I'm saying here in a particular order. So should we ignore the order or just let the people that just let the people that you've indicated are going to speak? Okay. I just didn't want to miss anybody. Okay.
Good morning, Mr. President and City Council members, as well as the guests that are here. My name is Professor Walter Palmer, University of Pennsylvania, where I teach American racism, and of course I helped create 50 years ago. I think that this resolution is very important, and I think as it recognizes 400 years of slavery inside of America, we need to recognize the fact that Africans have helped to build civilizations all across the world. A dozen or more, or less than a dozen European nations kidnapped, robbed, and stole Africans and brought them to all parts of the world. They took them into the Caribbean and West Indies. They took them into Puerto Rico. They took them into Haiti, into Brazil. They took them into Mexico, into Peru. They were set all over the world. And those Africans which are in Cuba and in Puerto Rico and in Mexico are the same as the Africans who are here. We are African Americans, they're African Brazilians, African Chileans, African Peruvians. And the reality is for us to really not only look at the work that Africans helped to build here in this nation and its economy, but the continued work that they've done all over the world, where America has segued into all these economies to further fasten America's hold on world economies. I think it's important for us to recognize the fact that the reason we come this late, 100 years later, to have this recognition lies largely because of the fact that many of us have benefited from the largesse of the African people, and at the same time have never really stood up to fight for them. We have a division within inside of our own communities, where African Americans, for the most part, have a disdain for poor black people, and they have a disdain for African people. And until we start to close those gaps, we will never be able to make the change. And I hope that this commission is more than show and tell, that it's more than artsy-craftsy, touchy-feely, that it really works towards trying to help restore to the African not only its greatness, but also the prospect of its economies. The idea of just simply having show and tell is, to me, irrelevant unless we also build economies amongst the people in the country who will be of African descent, as well as those Africans within the continent. And I stand here for this august body to once again ask and require that you make sure there's teeth in such a commission.
Thank you, Doctor.
Good morning. My name is Patricia Wilson Aden, and I'm the president and CEO of the African American Museum in Philadelphia. The African American Museum in Philadelphia brings diverse communities together in greater appreciation of the Black experience through the combined narratives of art, history, and culture. Our museum was the first institution built by a major U.S. city to house and to celebrate the work of African Americans. In the 4 decades since its creation, the African American Museum has become a premier destination within our region's cultural landscape, serving over 80,000 visitors, including 20,000 school-aged children. The museum serves the community as a gathering place, an educational resource, and a steward of a vast collection of art and artifacts. Our audience gains a unique perspective on the art, history, and culture of African Americans in the African diaspora. On behalf of the museum and the constituency we serve, I would like to applaud Councilwoman Blackwell for introducing the resolution to create the Special Committee on 400 Years of African American History. As the region's foremost cultural institution dedicated to the celebration of history and culture of African Americans and the African diaspora, the African American Museum supports the creation of the proposed special committee and pledges our commitment to supporting its critical mission. Born from the unprecedented tragedy of the slave trade, the story and presence of people of African descent on North American soil is yet one of triumph. Ours is a complex history of challenges and injustices interwoven with achievements of unequaled consequence. From the moment that those 20-odd Negroes arrived at Old Point Comfort in August of 1619, Black people have influenced and informed the history and culture of this nation. The American story cannot and should not be told without reference to and acknowledgement of our presence and our role. Yet, we know that our contributions, the hardships and prejudice committed against us, coupled with our hard-won achievements, the bravery of our heroes, the leadership of our trailblazers, and the impact and influence of our innovators, have too often been ignored, dismissed, and misinterpreted. It is only fitting that Philadelphia create a special committee tasked with commemorating the 40th anniversary of the arrival of Africans in the English colonies that would eventually become America. More important than the commemoration of this date is the special committee's charge to plan programs to acknowledge the impact of slavery, racial discrimination, and to coordinate and support scholarly research. This charge closely aligns with the work of the African American Museum in Philadelphia, We're eager to ensure that the work of the Federal Commission and the proposed special committee has meaningful impact and tangible outcomes. Thank you.
Councilwoman, did you want to, or you want to do it now? Yeah. Folks, if you will allow us to go a little off script, we just want to have time-specific recognition. Chair recognizes, and we'll come right back to the issue.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Kiona Sanchez.
Yes, thank you, and I want to, as an Afro-Latina, I want to not take away from the importance of the testimony that is here, but I'm going to ask my council colleagues and this council and all of the folks visiting us here today, at 11:50 across the world and in Puerto Rico, folks will be standing together in a moment of silence to grieve the 3,000 families, as some of our visitors have alluded today, in the one-year celebration of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. I would want to thank in particular all of the Philadelphians who in one way or another helped us as we raised money and welcomed thousands of new Philadelphians who arrived to from Puerto Rico since the storm. I in particular want to thank all of the agencies, Philadelphia Housing Authority, and all of the nonprofits organizations who stood together during this incredible time. We are all frustrated with the slow response of our federal government, and I hope that our fellow Americans in the Carolinas do not have to endure what Puerto Ricans and our friends in the U.S. Virgin Islands did during these Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Maria. I want to thank all of my colleagues and everyone in the Philadelphia area who somehow fundraised, joined us at the many, many events. At 12 noon, Representative Cruz and other elected officials will be raising the ceremonial flag at Antonia Pantoja School. On Monday, as I have done in the last 11 years, we will be raising the Puerto Rican flag, and I hope that my colleagues would join us. My young cousin in Puerto Rico said to me when I visited this summer about the storm and the effects afterwards, we have lost, and I'll say it in Spanish first, hemos perdido tanto que hemos perdido hasta el miedo. We have lost so much that we have even lost the ability to fear. So I ask that all of you join me, stand in one moment of silence for all of the folks that we lost, the thousands of folks in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. We can proceed. Thank you.
Diane Turner, curator. I bring you Peace and Freedom from Mr. Charles Bloxson, curator emeritus, and the Charles L. Bloxson Afro-American Collection, where we house more than 700,000 items from about African American history and culture. The creation of a commission in the city is not only timely and important, but critical during these times. This year marks the 150th anniversary of the birth of W.E.B. Du Bois. On display in the Bloxson collection is an exhibit celebrating W.E.B. Du Bois and the Philadelphia Negro. Du Bois is one of our nation's most prolific and innovative scholars, but is little known to many and is often just a footnote in our classrooms. In his book, The Souls of Black Folk, published in 1903, he writes, quote, "The problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line," end quote. I stand before you today in the 21st century to say that this remains a problem that has not been resolved. We need a commission. W.E.B. Du Bois also states, quote, "Herein lies the tragedy of the age. Not that men are poor, all men know something about poverty. Not that men are wicked. Who is good? Not that men are ignorant. What is truth? Nay, but that men know so little of men." This is true of African American history. We know so little, yet African American history is American history, and African Americans are among the oldest Americans. Next year marks 400 years of the African presence in English colonies, but there are scholarly studies that show that Africans were in America BC. We need a commission. In 2016, Mr. Bloxon had the Pennsylvania slave trade state marker placed along the Delaware River near Independence Seaport Museum to commemorate the lives of enslaved Africans brought as early as 1639. His commitment and dedication has resulted in markers throughout the city. In talking with Mr. Bloxon, he stated the following: the year 2019 gives the city of Philadelphia a great opportunity to place a city marker to commemorate the enslavement of men, women, and children of African descent. He recommends that, quote, the honorable members of City Hall and the council unveil a city marker to commemorate the peculiar institution of enslavement in the so-called city of Philadelphia. So we strongly support this commission, and we thank Councilwoman Janie Blackwell for introducing it. Thank you.
Ma'am, just for the record, just state your name. We didn't get your
Oh,
name.
I did at the beginning. Diane Turner, curator of the Charles L. Bloxon Afro-American Collection.
Thank you, Doctor.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Yuma Ba. I'm the president of Echoes of Africa. And also I'm a mother in the city of Philadelphia. I have a daughter who's 10 years old, who was born here. As African, we are more than 50,000 in the city of Philadelphia who come directly from Africa in the couple of years back to maybe around 1980s. And also, we all have almost kids in the city of Philadelphia. We thank the Councilwoman Jenny Blackwell to give us the opportunity to work with the community in the city of Philadelphia. We're supporting this committee because, as we know, as African descendant, also we have a lot of issue in this country because sometimes the misunderstanding, our kids who just got here maybe a couple of years and people who've been here more than 400 years ago who come. We want this committee to happen to help all this community to be able to work together, to understand also together. We say thank you to the Councilwoman and hope so you're going to accept this committee. Thank you.
Clerk, can you read our next speaker, please?
Hi, I'm Van Jessica Gladney, and I'm representing the University of Pennsylvania's Penn Slavery Project. So our project started last year, and our university had come forward a few years ago saying that we had nothing to do with the slave trade here in Philadelphia. And the reason that we are on semester number 3 is because our university, that turns out to be not true. And during our research, I realized that Pennsylvania and Philadelphia itself has a huge stake in American history. And I think it's really important for this committee to be based in Philadelphia. The Declaration of Independence was signed here, or written and signed, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. Like, this is where America was born. And America was built by slavery. The American Revolution was paid for by slave labor. And if there's one city that's going to commemorate the 400th anniversary of slaves on this soil of our country, it should definitely be Philadelphia. And the University of Pennsylvania is excited to support and be involved in all the things we want to see happen next year. So, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. You state your name for the record, and you may.
Good morning. My name is Gwen Ragsdale. My husband, J. Justin Ragsdale, and I own and operate the Lest We Forget Slavery Museum. It's the only museum in Philadelphia with actual slavery artifacts that my husband has been collecting for the past 60 years. This is a Middle Passage shackle. This is what our people were forced to wear as they were brought from Africa to the Americas and other parts of the world. Depending on how many enslaved Africans they had would determine how this shackle would be used. One rung would come off and go around the ankle of one African, the other rung would go around the ankle of another African, and they would be shackled together for the duration. It took 2 to 3 months to get from the shores of West Africa to the shores of South Carolina. It was a suffering trip. Those men who worked in those ships were former prisoners who had been let out of prison by the Queen of England and told that they would get money at the end of the trip if they could have access to any of the females while they were on that trip. Many of those women would be pregnant before they got to their final destination. The horrors didn't end there. It only began, followed by hundreds of years of slavery. We must remember the legacy of slavery. We cannot forget it. It's important to understand that aspects of slavery are still with us today. We are so happy that Councilwoman Blackwell produced this resolution to commemorate this part of American history. This is not Black history. This is American history, and it's important that we recognize that. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Please state your name for your record, and you may proceed with your public comment. Thank you.
Ghaffar, and I'm the chairman of the 400-Year Coalition. And what we have done, we've come together to actually perpetuate this for a whole year next year. Most struggles have talked about the slavery movement, but we want to present how the shackles of slavery have been mental and the shackles have been on the minds of our people for 400 years. And that's because it was misinformation, it was misreputation, it was defranchise of the African American. So our coalition will have one event every week next year for 52 weeks. So whether it be like Black History, where it's 1 month, we will have an event every week commemorating the 400-year struggle. So when you see, we have a website, we have some information that we'll be passing out, a website, and we'd like you to put hashtag 400 years. We'd like to see that all over social media so that we will be represented in this struggle. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Will you please state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your public comment.
I am J. Justin Ragsdale, and I am Chief Curator for Lest We Forget the Black Holocaust Museum here in Philadelphia. I'm the other half. Gwen Ragsdale is my wife. I am her husband, so we really don't have a name. But what it is, we really want this to happen. This is very, very important, and I can't say it enough. We say it forceful. We can go into anything we want to do, but we don't talk about the horrors of slavery, and that's very important that our children know it, because it's a fallout that's coming from this that's on them because they don't know what happened to us. We paid a heavy price to get here, and we got to let him know. It's very important, so that's all I can say. You know the rest.
Thank you for your testimony.
My name is Michael Cord. I'm with a group called ATTAC, A-T-A-C, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition. And I'm really not sure what I am going to say. I just hope that the enslaved ancestors guide the words I'm about to say for the next 2 minutes. And the first thing they told me to say is this: imagine that right now, as we're sitting here with our colleagues and maybe our spouses, maybe our children, that some Martians come down from outer space and they take your coworker, they take your wife, they take your husband, they take your son, they take your daughter, and they take you up to Mars. And when you're in Mars, they take away your English language. They take away your American nationality. They take away your Christian religion, your Muslim religion, your Judaic religion. They take away everything that made you what you were here on Earth. So now you're in Mars. You're not a Martian because you're not from Mars. You're no longer an Earthling because you're not in Earth anymore. For 246 years, from 1619 until 1865, that was the story of Africans in America. But it didn't stop in 1865. Many people think that the 13th Amendment, quote unquote, freed the slaves. ended slavery. It did not. 13th Amendment doesn't say slavery and involuntary servitude are hereby abolished, period. It doesn't say slavery and involuntary servitude are hereby abolished, exclamation point. It says slavery and involuntary servitude are hereby abolished, comma, except following conviction for a crime. So after the slave codes came the black codes. And the black codes were laws to criminalize black people. The law of vagrancy today came out of that. Vagrancy in 1865 is the same legal definition it is in 2018. Being in public with no visible means of support. So black people enslaved for 246 years, here comes the 13th Amendment, they're so-called freed. The county sheriff comes along, pardon my language, and says, what are you niggers doing out here? They say, we have no job, we have no real estate, we have nothing. Okay, you have nothing, you're a vagrant. They were convicted, and from that we have mass incarceration today. Let me wrap this up in 30 seconds by saying this. I fully support what Councilwoman Blackwell is trying to do, because the story of slavery in America is not just America. In general, it's Pennsylvania beginning in 1684. The man on top of this building, William Penn, was a slaveholder, held 3 at his Pennsbury Manor. And in my final 10 seconds, let me say this. In terms of the history, right here in Philadelphia, not just at 6th and Market where George Washington enslaved black people, but at Front and Market, the London Coffee House, beginning in 1754, black men, women, and children were bought and sold. So the story of slavery is not just an American story, it's a Philadelphia story. Philadelphia helped to break it. Philadelphia got to help to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Clerk, could you read the name of our next speaker? Or since we're a little bit out of order, is there anyone here who has signed up for public testimony and has not had the opportunity? Please approach the public comment podium, state your name for the record, and you may proceed.
Okay. My name is Joseph Danahill. This is an official decree in writ mandamus quo warranto. As such, requires immediate action and remedy. Every week, council, mayor, and others transfer private property to the government, probably illegally. Ben Franklin stated, "You have a republic if you can keep it." Founding fathers hated democracies, calling the mob rule or 2 wolves and a sheep voting on who's for dinner. The United States of America is a constitutional republic, which means agents and agencies are contractually bound to protect the rights of the people. As governor, senator, mayor, council, and others violate the Constitution and law to wage war on the people. Violating the Constitution in the very place it was written is illegal. His Attorney General enabling criminal behavior as he has accused the Pope and others of. Why has the Attorney General refused his sworn duty? Government stealing private property was a major cause of the American Revolution. The people require auditable proof from the representatives to prove consent of the governed exists. The Constitution demands it. The Constitution requires immediate remedy of this breach of law, breach of laws, breach of fiduciary duty. Your oath of office requires you to act or face prison. 42 U.S.C. 1982, 1983, 1985, 1986, 1987, 18 U.S.C. 241, 242, 2381, 2384. PA Constitution, Article 1, Sections 1 through 11. 26 PA CSA 703, 705, 708, 709, 712, 713, 716, and other laws listed in SCOTUS 158965, 141330, 144056 appear violated. I call for the federal and Commonwealth governments to perform their constitutional obligations, to investigate and prosecute all involved in the theft and illegal deed transfer of my home, 1038 West Wyoming Avenue. the denial of God-given 42 U.S.C. 1982 property rights for 24 years is egregious, extraordinary, oath-violating, and requires immediate remedy. A just government must obey the rule of law. This color of law government must have its charter to govern revoked until a constitutionally compliant government is installed. Public servants cannot refuse their sworn duty to act any more than a fireman can refuse to fight a fire. The sovereign people require oath, law, and constitutions be enforced, and jail is required for all who violate oath, constitution, or law. I remind Council, it takes a lot of cooperation to create and allow monumental corruption.
Thank you for your testimony. You may state your name for the record and proceed with your public comment. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Donna Cooper. I'm the Executive Director of Public Citizens for Children and Youth, and I'm here to urge Council at this point to vote not to approve the Keystone Opportunity Zone bill. That bill requires much more review by members of Council. This morning's inquiry began with a story of our libraries cutting back hours. My library in my neighborhood will no longer have Saturday hours. 4 blocks away, a hotel is proposed by a millionaire, and that bill eliminates all taxes, sales, corporate, and property taxes on that building for 10 years. Your action today will make that possible, while the citizens of my neighborhood can no longer bring their children to the library on a Saturday. This morning's inquiry included a letter from a parent who wondered why she can't send her child to her neighborhood elementary school because the kindergarten classes are full. That bill today will enable my neighborhood in Fishtown to have millionaires who will get tax breaks on properties for 10 years in a community with 2 Steven Star restaurants. This is not a blighted community. Developers are tripping over themselves from LA to New York to invest in Fishtown, to invest in North Philly at 17th and Lehigh. A property will get a 10-year tax break. Corporate millionaires. It is ironic that we began today's council session with a pastor who asked us to think about equity and justice, and we listened to 9 people talk about the blocks and collection on slavery. And we are about to give millionaires, 25 of them, 10 years tax-free, injuring our city services, injuring our children, and injuring our schools. So don't take my word for it. Hold the bill. You look at the properties. You look at the property by IKEA that's being given a tax break. You look at the properties at the Arsenal Business Center where charter schools are getting paid by the school district for rent, and the owners of those buildings are going to be tax-free on their rent profits for the next 10 years. Don't take my word for it. Just vote to hold the bill over, learn about the properties, and decide if they meet the state definition of blight, because the purpose of this Keystone Opportunity Zone is to stimulate development where it otherwise wouldn't happen. That isn't on Delaware Avenue in South Philly. That isn't in Fishtown. That isn't currently at 17th and Lehigh. And I bet you, when you look a little bit deeper, you'll agree with me that especially today, given how this council session began with that pastor calling us to fight for equity and justice, it's worthwhile to give this bill more review. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Great morning. My name is Obona Hagans, and I'm here to speak about 170408, which was introduced by Council members Reynolds Brown and Councilwoman Gim. To permanently eliminate suspending children from the 5th grade below is really like a no-brainer. But one of the things that we need to do while we're not suspending them is to make sure that those 5th graders or those 4th graders are reading on grade level. Because we know that 40-some-odd% of our children are not reading on grade level. So now you don't suspend them, but you're also not providing them with what they need to survive in this world. And also on the education note, and particularly on the enslavement issue, Christopher Columbus is still celebrated in our schools? Why is that tyrant, the boy that was lost, the one that's responsible for a lot of the things that happened to Africans and Afro-Americans, why is he still being celebrated in 2018 when we know that he was lost and what it did to us as African people in this country? So we need to also identify, while we're, keeping the kids in school, we need to identify those great students that are excelling that may not have an opportunity to go to college. We need to be able to support them. This city needs to be able to support them. I'm going to give an example with my son, who has done everything right. My son, Zaki Hagens, who is in the Netherlands right now studying music. We went to people on this council to try to get funding to get my son what he needed. But we had to go all around the city leaders that should be identifying people from the city who can build this city up. Not just ignore them and say, okay, well, they come from a poor family or a poor area. It's your responsibility to identify people in this community that can build this community up. Not just to say, let's keep them in school, let's do this. No, you got to do a lot more, and particularly the Afro-Americans in this council, to always or to continue to celebrate Christopher Columbus when you know what Christopher Columbus was responsible for our ancestors. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Our ancestors are spinning in their grave knowing that they died for the right to vote. And you're in office as Afro-Americans and you're not supporting the Afro-Americans in this city? Y'all got to get it together. Y'all got to get it together.
Thank you for your testimony, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Pam Africa, and I'm dealing with Resolution 170675, introduced by Councilmember Jones, and it's dealing with the ordinance to amend the Philadelphia zoning maps by changing the zoning designation to certain areas of land located within an area bounded by Woodbine Avenue, Upland Way, 59th Street, Lancaster Avenue, and 62nd Street. It also, what I'm talking about is also dealing with a resolution, I don't know the name, but it fits right in here, and where they're talking about naming the street. Well, they've done it. Named the street after Wilson Goods Way. I'm very opposed to that. I was here last week, and I got a lot more information that I found out now that I didn't have then. One of the things I like to say, 2 quotes by John Africa: no one has the right to do wrong. Second quote: just because it's illegal, don't make it right. We had a meeting with Councilman Jones dealing with the fact that no one in my family was notified about him naming the street after Wilson Good. No one in the Osage Avenue whose homes was devastated and and who's been suffering for over 30 years behind the act on May 13th, 1985. Also, who wasn't notified was the people, the residents in the area where he was going to actually put the street. This has caused a lot of problems, and we came here looking for conflict resolution. And I went to different council people. They didn't remember signing any resolution. And, I told Mr. Jones that what he did was very devious and deceptive, and I went on to prove it. And because when you name a street after W. Wilson Good, that is newsworthy. If the news media really had known that on June 21st, a street was being named after W. Wilson Good, Wilson Good's Way, then it would have been front page news, it would have been the talk of the media, and it would have been worldwide, because there's no way we would have stood by and allowed it. So I'm saying it was devious and deceptive because people didn't know. And Mr. Jones came to a meeting last night that was pulled together by the community to deal with this. What he said was he was wrong for not contacting us. He was wrong for not allowing the residents in that area and all to be able to respond to this. He said he was wrong because he did the wrong thing throughout the whole thing, right? But Mr. Good is a mentor of his. So this is a friendship thing that dealing with a situation where it has caused such turmoil in this entire city. I have a document, a paper that was, an article that was in the newspaper that was done by Attorney Michael Cord, who spoke here a few minutes ago, who talked about the devastation. I'd like to make sure everybody get a copy
Yeah, we just
of
want
it
to make sure.
so they know what it is that we're talking about. And when he said that he would not rescind this street despite the fact that the community stood up, Osage Avenue who suffered, my family who suffered, and the people within the area that he's naming, putting the street at, is suffering now. And you know, he should not have the right to do that. And what he said is that he do have the right to put a sign up in somebody's neighborhood and without contacting the people to find out, how do you feel about this?
Right.
And you know, how do we feel about this? You murdered our children. Right. You murdered our family. How do...
Sam.
The time is up. But let me say what I want,
yeah,
right?
Just give me some conclusion.
Number one, I want the, you know, that street rescinded, and you know, and then I think in all fairness, because no due process was done here whatsoever, there need to be in city council hearing dealing with the naming of that street. The Osage neighbors should be here. We should be here.
Man, come on.
And
come on.
that's what we want.
Because we got a lot of people that want to speak on this issue. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Malele Gilliard, and I actually am a representative directly pertaining to the Overbrook Farms Association as well as the Winfield Residents Association. And so this is also in accordance with the introduction by Curtis Jones regarding 170675. And so I want everyone here to know, especially you, that I personally took the time to walk the streets, and I communicated with 18 blocks worth of residents directly affecting where the Wilson Good Way would take place of the name changing. Not one person that I communicated with, just as recently as this Saturday, and also going back to just yesterday, were aware of it, and no one had any communication to talk with them. So what I need is for this to be immediately opposed when it even comes to a communication of zoning and mapping, because there is a lack of transparency with you in our community in relation to how things are changing. We get the feel-good things. We know when Villanova helps to clean up our blocks. We know about the school giveaway and things of that nature. But it seems as if when it comes to the serious things that pertain to, you know, are you being confused when it has something to do with maybe spot zoning, where it's like an immediate need for someone in the community to have something change personally with their actual residency? I also communicated with St. Joe's University, their public relations and community outreach. They too did not know. And the reason why I communicated with them is because I learned from reading on social media that potentially people will be in my neighborhood 1 block away from where I live and protesting. And there's students around there. I am an educator. I actually have students who attend St. Joseph's University. I said they need to have an alert. So there literally is an alerting situation right now where things need to be halted immediately, because the Winfield Residents Association, who I also spoke with, their leadership, and Overbrook Farms, neither of them were made aware. Not until I took the time out and additional people in my community block. My Hasidic Jewish neighbors, they coming up to me on Yom Kippur yesterday asking me, why is this happening? I'm going down my block, Channel 10 is asking me, what's going on? So therefore, there needs to be a little bit more outreach on your behalf outside of this room in relation to this. So yes, you did come last night to Penn Memorial, to church, to talk with us. However, you lied. You said right then and there, when one of our residents asked you, is there some zoning getting ready to take place? Is there anything getting ready to transpire with changing the streets or anything of that nature? You gave us a look and you said no. So if there's anyone else who can attest to what I heard yesterday evening, I need you all to stand up. So therefore, like I said, I live on the block immediately that is going to be next door to what's happening with this name change. And this is what made me investigate further. So this is why I'm here today.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
My name is Ruth Burchett. I'm here to speak on Council Bill 180100 in opposition to Temple University building an Alpha Center at 1301 Diamond Street. I'm addressing today council members, some of whom are saying they have not heard about this until last week at all. This bill was voted out of the Rules Committee. It also, council rules were suspended on June 14th to allow for it to come now directly to a vote. On June 14th also, our council member, Darrell Clarke, in holding this bill, sent his staff throughout the audience to all of us who were signed up to testify, saying that if we would not testify, he would also hold a community meeting. That has not happened. And I say to you that last week, on the testimony of Greg Bonaparte, who testified in behalf of Berean Presbyterian Church, also happens to be a 25-year employee of Temple University. Mr. Ali, who testified as well for the Gang Association, also happens to be a 30-year employee of Temple University. And then the young lady from the Philadelphia Housing Authority who testified, in my view, brings irrelevance, because if indeed Temple University and the Housing Authority want to do something in collaboration around an early learning center and want to have their children experimented on and early diagnosed with psychology, different psychological conditions, then let them have that to themselves, but not the children of our community. We do not need early diagnosis. As we stated before, Temple University was the EMO for 5 community schools. And after 5 years of sucking up the money, they did not turn those schools around. And now they're coming after our little babies, and we say no. No to the psychology students at Temple University and the education students at Temple University getting their PhDs and masters on the backs of our children. No, they will not attend the psychology clinic. What elementary school or what daycare center in this city has a psychology clinic attached to it? Probably none. We say no.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Good afternoon. Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
Is this?
Is it on?
Good afternoon. My name is Jacqueline Wiggins. I am here to talk about Bill 180100. It has been held again. How long can this be held? The things that the former Speaker Ruth Burchett mentioned are real. And in that, we also had discussion about the Special Committee on 400 Years of African American History. I think the thing that folks need to understand is that when African people came into the Americas, they came with skills, with trades, they came with things. And to have an outcome from a university, Temple University, to have an outcome in North Central Philadelphia with Dunbar, after 5 years, Dunbar's reading scores 18%, math 17%, Tanner Duckery, reading 25%, math 32%, Elverson, Ferguson, John Wanamaker. This is criminal. and now Temple University wants our 3 to 5-year-olds? I should hope that with this delay, council members, that you are digging deep and doing the research that is called for with respect to no vote on 180100. Our children and our families do not need to be researched any further. Tuskegee was mentioned last week. Henrietta Lacks. What must we do to have you understand clearly? This is a wrong. Council members, reach deep, do your homework, do the research, and vote no. 180100.
Thank you for your testimony.
Hello, my name is Bianca Parker, and I'm a resident, and I want to say no and urge my council members to reject and do not allow the passage of Bill number 180100, which will authorize the furtherance of predatory encroachment of Temple University's campus footprint, extend spin district, building of a research facility, and expansion of Temple police surveillance. And subject our African American children to racial experiments. Camera surveillance is a common research method utilized in studies. Just as the Tuskegee experiments exploited African Americans for scholarly and scientific gain, Temple University plans an Alpha Center for research of African American North Philadelphia preschool children. This plan also competes with existing area daycares. Temple failed 4 schools during 5 years of a school district funding contract. Young African American children will be subject to mental health treatment and study. As staff, ungraded Temple University students will be treatment providers at the psychology clinic. Patients of Temple University Psychology Clinic will be subject to research studies. Temple must abandon plans for Alpha Center to expand campus. Temple must abandon plans to subject African American children and African American adults to research studies, and Temple must abandon plans for dental clinic that already exist. I'm going to voice my opposition to this travesty. I'm going to speak up and out against Temple. And I urge my council members to vote no to early learning research and mental health labeling of African American preschool-aged children in North Philadelphia, and urge my council members to vote no to bill number 180100. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Good morning, City Council President Darrell Clarke, who is our district councilman. My name is Paula Peebles, and I'm here today asking City Council, and I'm hoping everybody's paying attention, because right now in the country they're talking about a blue wave in November, and in Philadelphia we're talking about a people's wave next year. And while we're talking about that, because all too often we come here to City Council about our community. As I indicated, I am an indigenous member of North Philadelphia. That means I was born and bred. And since I could remember, we have always had to fight, and you know this, Mr. Clarke, had to fight Temple University from encroaching on our community. Here we find ourselves now having to protect our small children, our toddlers, and those yet unborn from being subjected to a research facility right there in the heart of North Philadelphia at 13th and Diamond. We keep coming here every week appealing to council. Darrell Clarke has 1 vote. We're appealing to all the rest of you. You vote no against this. You talk about children. Norris Homes doesn't even exist now. I know they're going to say, oh, Paula, we're rebuilding Norris Home. But when they rebuild public housing in North Philadelphia, it is depopularized, which means if it was 800 people in Norris Home and they build back in favor of Temple, they're 300 families. That's what they're doing in our community. And so we're appealing to council, and you're hearing it firsthand from Paula. I'm appealing you on behalf of my people in North Philadelphia to rescind or vote down Bill 18001, because it will totally decimate the young children coming up in North Philadelphia. We could use that land better. And as I often tell Councilman Darrell Clarke's staff, we need housing, affordable housing in North Philadelphia. We don't need them to continue to build apartment buildings. They have closed down Freedom Theater. My young daughter who lives in Los Angeles graduated from Freedom Theater. But my 14-year-old grandson can't go to Freedom Theater because it no longer exists. So they're pushing us out. They're pushing our culture out, Darrell. And what I'm saying to you, President Clarke, and what I'm saying to you is that we can't stand for this any longer. And don't get mad at us, because November 7th starts next year's election. Don't get mad at us when we oppose you because you've opposed us for 4 years.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
My name is Arnold Jones, and I'm speaking on behalf of Bill 170765 in reference to the street naming for Wilson Good. The opening prayer mentioned praying for children. So I just want to mention 5 children: 7-year-old Tomasa, 9-year-old Delicia, 10-year-old Phil, 11-year-old Netta, 13-year-old Tree, and 25-year-old Rhonda. Those names might not ring a bell to everybody, but they were 5 of the victims of the MOVE bombing. So my thing is, at this time when this occurred, I was 16 years old. I lived on 54th and Locust. My mother was flustered, frustrated, frightened. She didn't know what was going on. It took me almost 20 years to realize actually what happened. So my thing is, with all the hard work that every one of you have to do, it's one thing we have to remember as men, as fathers, as African men, as black men. We must protect our children. We must stand for justice. There's no way that anyone could possibly believe that the street should be, any street should be named after Wilson Good. Because the reality is, he was the mayor. He was in control, and he was complicit in that crime. Those murders rest on the hands of the city of Philadelphia. We cannot have that happen. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Good afternoon, Council President, members of City Council. My name is Matt McClure. I'm here today as a resident. I'm a zoning attorney, but I'm here to give comment on bill numbers 180295 introduced by Councilwoman Bass, as well as bill number 180498 introduced by Councilwoman Blackwell. I'm here on behalf of the BIA and as a resident. Both pieces of legislation are very important and well-intentioned. However, we have fears that there's going to be significant unintended consequences from both pieces of legislation. Bill number 180295 makes many important changes to some highly technical provisions dealing with the Zoning Board of Adjustment, specifically changes to the 1-year rule. However, these changes to the 1-year rule, we believe, could frustrate developers' efforts to practically negotiate with RCOs and instead force them to hearings, contested hearings, rather than to negotiate because of fear of the implication of the 1-year rule. There are also other important timing requirements in this legislation that are impossible for an applicant really to comply with, given the limited resources of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Regarding bill number 180498A, this bill makes, again, some highly technical changes to the Zoning Board's ability to grant minor adjustments called administrative adjustments that take place many times a year or 2 after the actual zoning approval to deal with some technical changes that you find out from site conditions. Again, these changes sometimes happen close to the building permit phase and after financing has been secured for a project. We think the unintended consequence will be a lot of needless cases are going to go to the zoning board, and also will really frustrate the ability for projects to go forward at the last minute, even for some very minor changes. So on behalf of the BIA and members of the zoning community, we ask that the legislation be held and amended following meetings with a working group of zoning attorneys, community members, and city officials. This is important legislation. It's important to get it right. We have plenty of people who are willing to work to make sure this legislation gets done right. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Hercules Grigos. I'm a zoning attorney in Philadelphia. I'm here today to speak on bills number 1800295 and 180498. While I'm usually here in my capacity representing a client, I come here today to respectfully request that these bills be held for additional comment. With regard to Councilwoman Blackwell's bill regarding the administrative review process, I agree that the process is vague and needs to be better articulated with clear standards. However, the proposed time frame does not allow enough time for architects, engineers, and city departments to review the fully designed building plans, which are much more detailed than the zoning schematics that go before the ZBA and RCOs. As currently written, this bill will create situations where necessary minor changes that come out of the building code, streets department, and water department review cannot be implemented without restarting the process and having the full RCO and ZBA process to widen a driveway, add a stair tower, or reduce a unit. I think the city, developers, and the community would benefit from additional discussion to narrowly tailor this bill, and address only those minor changes. I thank you for your time, and I'll make myself available to you and your staff to continue the discussion. With regard to Councilman Bass's bill regarding the one-year rule, I also think that this has unintended consequences. I think the city and the developers would benefit from additional discussion on this bill, and I believe that anything that we can do to continue collaboration between developers, communities, and RCOs, I think we can work on that, and I'd like to offer my time to work with council on that. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Krista Hayburn, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of WAR, Women Organized Against Rape. Today regarding the proposed resolution of 180768 by Councilmember Johnson, reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act here in Philadelphia. Over the last year, the Me Too movement has created a platform for victims and survivors of sexual violence an opportunity to be heard. It has opened the door for victims and survivors like myself to feel safe to come forward and tell someone that they have been sexually victimized. The Violence Against Women Act provides people who have experienced sexual violence and those who have not a lifeline to receive comprehensive and preventative sexual assault services from organizations like WAR. Supporting Councilmember Johnson's resolution today will reauthorize the VAWA, which is critical in protecting our community from helping victims to access the help, hope, and healing they need and deserve. Why should you all support Councilmember Johnson's resolution today? The Violence Against Women Act saves lives, money, and benefits the residents of Philadelphia. Statistics show 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men will be raped at some point in their lives. In the US alone, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men have experienced some form of sexual violence. The lifetime cost of rape per victim costs $122,461. Annually, rape costs the US more than any other crime at a staggering $127 billion in both tangible, which includes medical care, criminal justice, lost wages, and treatment, as well as intangible, pain and suffering. 81% of women and 35% of men report significant short-term and long-term impacts, such as post-traumatic stress, as well as health care. And the statistics go on. But what I want to share is this: rape continues to be the most underreported crime here in Philadelphia. By supporting this bill and reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, we together as a community can continue to fund prevention strategies that will help teach people how to respond to sexual violence from occurring in the first place, preventing harm to our children, families, and loved ones. By not supporting it, today's resolution, all of the momentum that we have gained in the last year will be lost. Let's keep up the momentum moving forward together as a community and support Councilmember Johnson's reauthorization. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Bass.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to acknowledge for the record that 180295 is being held as we're working out some additional details to try to reach some compromise on that bill. So I just wanted to
Those
state
were
for the
the,
record.
the bills that were just referenced by the two prior speakers?
Yes,
Yeah,
by the
okay.
prior speakers, yes.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Good afternoon. My name is Aminata Sandra Calhoun. I am here to address Bill 170675 in reference to Councilman Curtis Jones Jr. I want to speak to you in this way. This bill is not just political, it's a human matter. And the reason it's a human matter, because you made it a human matter when you expressed, when we asked you, could you rescind? And when you said you could not, that you could rescind, but you won't. This is where it's a human matter. When you took the position to highly disrespect your constituents, which are human, when they spoke out to you and said, no, this is not what we want, well, you made it a human matter of showing high disrespect, disregard. And for that, you are done, Councilman City Curtis Jones. You are done. And as you express that Good is your mentor, well, upon you being done, then you can go work for W. Wilson Good. All right.
Thanks for your testimony. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Aisha K. Elmeki. I came to speak about the same issue. I was seriously disappointed that City Council signed the resolution introduced by Councilman Curtis Jones to add former Mayor Wilson Good's name to the 2400 block of North 59th Street. Mr. Good admits that it was a horrible mistake. We all make mistakes, but as moral individuals, we have to try to correct them, okay? In my opinion, he needs to try to seek forgiveness. He needs to seek redemption. Mr. Good should be working every day to do whatever he can to attempt to right that wrong. No, he can't bring the people back, of course. He can't really undo that horror, but he can and should work to alleviate some of the trauma that has been, the Move family has suffered. Instead of saying, if they come to me, I'll help them, he should be asking them, what can I do? In my humble opinion, he could work to have the innocent members of their family released from prison, where they've been for the last 40 years. We're supposed to build a city, not bomb it. We see signs all over the place. Says, see something? Say something. I'm saying something. Okay? There'll be a demonstration tomorrow when this addition is added to the street at 10 a.m. at 2400 block of North 59th Street. I hope you will join us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Christine Stutman. I'm the Executive Director of Lutheran Settlement House. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about how the Violence Against Women Act helps to support victims and survivors of domestic violence, as well as prevention efforts to make sure this type of violence in our community ends. I would like to recognize City Council continued support of Lutheran Settlement House and our sister agencies who are here today, and the work that we are all doing to prevent domestic violence and to support those who have experienced it. Every person deserves to live without violence, and VAWA helps ensure we have the vital resources needed to make this work possible. Thank you, Councilman Johnson, for introducing this resolution. In light of the recent tragic loss of Linda Rios Newby, we can all feel how detrimental domestic violence is to our community, and even to our own mental health and well-being as bystanders. VAWA helps fund counseling and support services like we provide at Lutheran Settlement House to support survivors and also their family members. Despite this, Congress only approved VAWA until December 2018. This is unacceptable and reflects a gross oversight of just how big an impact violence has on all of us. I am grateful that those of us in this room all share the same sense of urgency in reauthorizing VAWA, and hope our joint advocacy will help others recognize the gravity of this issue as well. I hope we will push for at least a 5-year authorization period so that there is security and stability in our services. Before I finish, I would like to extend a special thank you to Council President Clarke and to Councilman Greenlee for their support and involvement in our Men Can initiatives over the years. Men Can encourages men to join efforts in speaking out to prevent and eliminate domestic violence. Your leadership has been invaluable, and on behalf of all of us at Lutheran Settlement House, I thank you both for your work with LSH. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Janine Lasitsky, the Executive Director at Women Against Abuse, and I'm pleased to be here today in support of Councilman Johnson's resolution to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. And I also want to thank all of the members, because we in Philadelphia are fortunate that we have a city council that stands behind fighting towards ending domestic violence in our city. All of you have been incredibly supportive. The Violence Against Women Act, which was enacted in 1994, is the landmark legislation that creates funding for life-saving services for victims of DV. And it puts essential protections in place. In fact, it was the first U.S. federal legislation acknowledging domestic violence as a crime. And it provided federal resources to encourage coordinated community responses to combating this violence. Its reauthorizations, which took place in 2000, 2005, and 2013, have enhanced the legislation by creating a much-needed legal assistance program, by expanding the definition of crime to include sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking. The bill was also strengthened to include new focus areas such as prevention, rape crisis centers, and culturally specific services. Through the years, the reauthorizations have built a much more holistic approach to addressing these crimes by creating new programs to meet emerging needs of communities, working to ensure protections for some of the most vulnerable, including Indigenous women, immigrant victims, LGBTQ+ victims, college students, and even public housing residents. Other important examples of the protections available through VAWA include prevention of unjust evictions for survivors in federally subsidized housing by creating an emergency housing transfer option so that no victim has to choose between having a home and being safe. Also, provision of a process for immigrant victims to apply for U visas so that they're not forced to stay with an abusive partner out of fear of being deported or being separated from their U.S.-born children. In addition to these crucial protections, VAWA also provides grants administered through Department of Justice Office of Violence Against Women. And just to summarize, we've gotten millions and millions of dollars here in Philadelphia through those grants to really make a difference and start preventing domestic violence. There's many other ways that VAWA has helped us, but just in closing, I would say that the latest bill makes modest enhancements based on the needs of victims, specifically investing in evidence-based prevention, protecting victims and communities from abusers with access to firearms. I won't go on because I'm out of time.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you for your work. All right, this is our last speaker today.
Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Miller Wilson. I'm the Executive Director of HIAS Pennsylvania, an immigration refugee resettlement agency, and a partner of Women Organized Against Rape and Women Against Abuse and many of the other folks that testified today. And I just want to highlight their remarks and support Councilman Johnson's resolution in support of the Violence Against Women's Act. Immigrant victims of domestic violence, unfortunately, are numerous. Our office serves more than 150 immigrant victims per year. VAWA most particularly offers to immigrant women the ability to self-petition for status, which is critically important for their safety. In most cases, when a person is married, their husband petitions for immigrant status on their behalf. In the case of a battered spouse, their husband holds that against their head and says, I will not petition for you, and I will take your children, and you'll never see them again unless you do what I say. So this is a critically important remedy, and I'm here to represent that we serve many, many, many immigrant victims of domestic violence, and this is a critically important bill. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. That concludes our speakers for today. Thank you. That concludes our public comment session for today. Now consider the bills and resolutions on the second reading. Councilman Swiller, did you want to be recognized?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I do have to leave the session. I would like to be counted as voting aye on all bills and resolutions.
And amendments, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman.
Mr. President.
Okay. Chair also recognizes Councilman Jones. Yes.
Mr. President, I think we're in the same session where we have to be, so I'd like to be recorded on aye on all bills.
All right, let me see how many we have here. Nobody else can leave. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, okay. Councilman, leave shall be granted. Thank you, sir. Let the record reflect that both Councilmen Squilla and Jones had pressing business outside of the chamber and are reported as voting aye on all bills and resolutions and amendments. Thank you. Mr. Decker, please read the title of 180756.
A resolution urging the Pennsylvania State Legislature to pass House Bill 2060, which provides further protections to victims of domestic violence.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds Brown. It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. Resolution 180756 is adopted. Mr. Decker, please read the title of 180761.
A resolution authorizing the creation of a special committee on 400 years of African American history to evaluate the impact of African Americans have had on the history of this country, and acknowledging the creation of the federal commission by the same name that was formed in recognition of the 400-year anniversary of the arrival of Africans in the English colonies at Old Point Comfort, Virginia in 1619.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank everyone for listening to those important people. I would like to offer an amendment to resolution number 180761. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of council, and I move for its adoption.
Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it. Resolution 180761 has been amended. It will be on our next session of council. You can do it. You want to do it now? We're going to run the bill now? Resolution now? Okay. It's been amended. Councilwoman, we're going to ask that you make a motion on 180761 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the amendment that has just been adopted, and also for the adoption of it and the adoption of the resolution.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly second. All
Thank
those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, Resolution 180-761 has been adopted. Mr. Decker, 180-763.
A resolution calling on the legislature of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to oppose House Bill 2654, a proposal concerning small cell wireless facilities, which would remove local control of the public right-of-way and municipal infrastructure.
Chair recognizes Councilman Heenan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the resolution. Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. 180-763 is adopted. Mr. Decker, 180-764.
A resolution calling on the United States Senate to oppose Senate Bill 3157, known as the Streamline Small Cell Deployment Act, which would considerably limit local control of the public right-of-way and municipal infrastructure.
Chair again recognizes Councilman Heenan.
The resolution. Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. Resolution 180-764 is adopted. Mr. Decker, 180-768.
A resolution urging Congress to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act, VAWA, which helps to prevent and respond to domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking.
Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Council President, I move for the adoption of the resolution.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it. 180-768 is adopted. Mr. Decker, 180-769.
A resolution appointing Joshua Harris to the Board of Directors of the Philadelphia Land Bank.
Chair again recognizes Councilmember Johnson.
Council President, I move for the adoption of the resolution.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. Resolution 180-769 is adopted. Mr. Decker, 180-775.
A resolution urging the Pennsylvania House of Representatives to pass Senate Bill 501, which would require the relinquishment of all guns within 24 hours by individuals who are the subject of protection from abuse orders, shorten the time defendants convicted of misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence must surrender their guns from 60 days to 48 hours, and prohibit allowing friends and family members outside of the abusers' households to store firearms surrendered by these individuals.
Chair recognizes Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move for the adoption.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. 180-775 is adopted. Mr. Decker, 180-776.
A resolution calling on the United States Congress to support the passage of the Rent Relief Act.
Chair again recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move for the adoption.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, let the record reflect it. Councilman O'Neill, Councilman Taubenberger, Councilman O are voting nay. And that resolution is adopted, 180-776. Mr. Decker, 180-784.
A resolution also naming St. Albans Street between 7th and 8th Streets as Eddie Lang Way.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Bass. It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. 180-784 is adopted. Mr. Decker, 180-600.
Bill number 180-600A, entitled An Ordinance Amending Chapter 193200 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Keystone Opportunity Zone, Economic Development District, and Strategic Development Area, by providing for further Keystone Opportunity Expansion Zones.
This bill has been heard on 2 separate days. The question is, shall the bill pass finally? Mr. Decker, call the roll.
Councilwoman Bass. Councilwoman Blackwell. Councilman Dom. Councilman Green. Councilman Greenlee. Councilwoman Gim. Councilman Heenan. Councilman Johnson. Councilman Jones is voting aye. Councilman O'Neill. Councilman O. Councilwoman Parker. Councilwoman Cornelius Sanchez. Councilwoman Reynolds Brown. Councilman Squilla is voting aye. Councilman Taubenberger. Council President Clarke.
Aye, the ayes are 16, the nays are 1. Majority of members present voting in the affirmative, the bill passes. Mr. Decker, 180-077A.
An ordinance amending Chapter 192600 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Business Privilege Taxes, by eliminating for new businesses the requirement to make an estimated payment when filing a return for their first tax year of business operations, and allowing the estimated payment in succeeding years to be made in quarterly installments.
This bill has been heard on 2 separate days. The question is, shall the bill pass finally? Mr. Decker, call the roll.
Councilwoman Bass. Councilwoman Blackwell. Councilman Dom. Councilman Green. Councilman Greenlee. Councilwoman Gim. Councilman Heenan. Councilman Johnson. Councilman Jones is voting aye. Councilman O'Neill. Councilman O. Councilwoman Parker. Councilwoman Quinones Sanchez. Councilwoman Reynolds Brown. Councilman Squilla is voting aye. Councilman Taubenberger. Council President Clarke.
Aye, the ayes are 17 and nays are 0. Majority of members present voting in the affirmative. The bill passes. Mr. Decker, 180-498A.
An ordinance amending Title 14 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Zoning and Planning to provide for the procedures for the administrative review process.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Blackwell.
Mr. President, I would like to offer an amendment to Bill Number 180-498. A copy of this has been circulated to all members of council. And before I move for the adoption of the amendment, let me say that the purpose of this bill was to create transparency between, so that city council knew what they were doing, so when they have administrative review process, so that RCOs and community people would know what's happening. This amendment was written by my staff along with city planning and the law department. Now, BIA, who sent their lawyers here, never contacted us. I think they sent my lawyer something last night. And this has just been an issue about transparency. We move for this amendment, but anybody who has some issues or want to talk about it, just come to us. You want to come and testify and say you have all these groups? Well, you didn't come to the public hearing. You haven't contacted my office, but we'll still be nice. We're still open. You know where I am. Contact me. Thank you. I move for the amendment.
Thank you. There's been a motion and properly seconded for the amendment to 180-498A. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, the ayes have it. 180-498A is amended. It will be on our second reading and final passage calendar at our next session of council. Mr. Decker, you have additional resolutions.
A resolution recognizing Les Chapeau Project and its artists on the occasion of their one-day art gallery showcasing international artists and challenging the negative narrative surrounding immigrants and individuals from Africa, Asia, and the Americas, introduced by Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it. Resolution is adopted.
And a resolution authorizing the Committee on Children and Youth to hold public hearings examining the prevalence of child hunger in Philadelphia and evaluating the efficacy of existing programs addressing child hunger, introduced by Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Chair again recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. Resolution is adopted.
And a resolution declaring October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, introduced by Councilman Greenlee.
Chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the adoption of the resolution.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. Resolution is adopted.
And a resolution honoring and recognizing Diversified Community Services on the 50th anniversary of its incorporation for the organization's dedication to improving the South Philadelphia community through education and economic empowerment, introduced by Councilman Johnson.
Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Council President, I move for the adoption of the resolution.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. Resolution is adopted.
And a resolution declaring September 15, 2018 through October 15, 2018 as Hispanic Heritage Month here in the city of Philadelphia to honor the role that Hispanics have played and continue to play in the economic, cultural, and social development of our city and nation, introduced by Councilwoman Quinones Sanchez.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Quinones Sanchez.
Thank you, Council President. I move for its adoption.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. Resolution is adopted.
And a resolution honoring and recognizing the men and women of First Builders Incorporated for their commitment to building a new pathway to viable careers in the construction industry for the city of Philadelphia's next generation of working men and women and labor leaders, introduced by Councilwoman Parker.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move for the adoption.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. Resolution is adopted.
And a resolution recognizing and celebrating the Band of Brothers family reunion in Philadelphia, introduced by Councilman O.
Chair recognizes Councilman O.
Thank you very much. I move for the adoption of the resolution.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it, and that resolution is adopted.
There are no other resolutions on the final passage calendar, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Decker. Any speeches on behalf of the minority? Chair recognizes Councilman O.
Thank you very much, Council President. I just wanted to recognize that our first speaker raised the issue of Puerto Rico, and I appreciate her concern. I just wanted to let everyone know that Councilwoman Maria Quinones Sanchez has been a leader in helping Puerto Rico, not only raising over $300,000, not only visiting the island of Puerto Rico numerous times, but also working with other leaders to build a unified coalition. I was at Concilio's annual event, and they pointed out that when she was on the island of Puerto Rico, she would not stay in a hotel. She stayed in her home with no electricity, no water. And I'm just pointing that out because a lot of times people don't know, when they come across an issue, the amount of work that council people put into the things that they do. And I think, certainly on a national and even global basis, Maria Quinones Sanchez has been a leader, a fundraiser. She has been a legislative champion in so many ways. We're very proud of her and thank her for her work.
Thank you. You are so right, Councilman. And speeches on behalf of the majority. Chair recognizes Councilman Heenan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to remind not just this body, but the city of Philadelphia and the general electorate. Unfortunately, we're not going to. So Tuesday next week on September 21st is National Voter Registration Day. And unfortunately, we won't have a council session, so I got to talk about it now why we have the opportunity to raise attention to National Voter Registration Day. In light of our extremely low turnout that we've been in the voter participation over the past several years, I think our commissioners, led by Chairwoman Lisa Dealey, and our other commissioners have done an extraordinary job over the past 3 years, along with this legislative body, educating our youth, going in our schools, having mock elections, going out to events, and really trying to change how people view, what it's like to come out to vote, whether they're voting for a superhero in the booths or they're, voting for someone that they write in, just encouraging people that, it is, something that our country fought for and has been our right to vote, and we should exercise that right to vote. Unfortunately, when you have a spike in elections, depending upon the election and midterms, they vary off cycles. We'd have 8-9%. In presidential elections, we can, be as upward as 60%. All right, but the baseline is really around 17%. And, I want to thank our commissioners here in the city of Philadelphia for being innovative, for working with outreach programs with each and every member of this body, raising light to encouraging people to increase turnout, increase participation on issues that are important for you, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's some of the issues that we are talking about here and discussing here today, such as Councilwoman Blackwell recognizing the 400-year anniversary and putting the task force together along with other bodies and branches of our government. It's important, all right, that people come out and fight for issues that are important to themselves. And there's no better way to do that, to stand up what's important to you, and then coming out and participating in the election process. So recognizing that next week, Tuesday, is National Voter Registration Day is important to all Americans, especially Philadelphians, participating in every election. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to do a couple announcements. One, immediately following the council session, we'll be having a briefing with the Pennsylvania Apartment Association in the caucus room. Lunch will be provided, so hopefully my colleagues and staff will be able to attend in the caucus room for a briefing with the Apartment Association and have an opportunity to eat lunch. In addition, there are two events going on this weekend. For those who are athletically inclined, hopefully you will be able to participate in the 21st Annual Walter E. Brandon Sickle Cell 5K Walk and Run. That will be at Fairmount Park, Belmont Avenue, and the Avenue of the Republic. You can still register up to 7 a.m. Saturday morning, and the actual walk/run will start at 8:30. Also, some of you may have watched the clip that was on NBC 10 this week when it was a piece on Kiara Roseborough, who is the actual national child ambassador for sickle cell. She lives here in the city of Philadelphia and is a phenomenal ambassador on behalf of children across the world who are dealing with sickle cell. So that is Saturday morning for the 21st Annual Walter E. Brandon Sickle Cell Walk. Also on Saturday morning will be the 7th Annual St. Joe's Kinney Center Walk/Run 5K for autism. The Kinney Center does a phenomenal job providing resources and activities for young people in our region that are dealing with autism. That walk will begin at 8:30. You can register for the event up to 7:30 on Saturday morning, and that'll be held at St. Joe's University. And then finally, on a somewhat more somber note, just want to remind council members and staff that tomorrow at 11:30, we will have the plaque dedication for Linda Rios Newby outside of her office. As many of you know, that tomorrow would have been her birthday, so hopefully you'll be able to come out and we'll honor Linda with the plaque dedication outside her office. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Yes, Mr. President, I want to underscore 3,000 times and put in bold ink the exclamation points made by Councilman O. Councilwoman Sanchez's unwavering tenacity over many, many months should not be questioned by anyone. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you, Council President. The unfunded pension liability is the most serious fiscal challenge to confront us as a city. At present, the city has an unfunded pension liability of approximately $6.1 billion, excluding other post-employment benefits like medical coverage, which would increase the total unfunded liability to more than $8 billion. Since 1999, the city has incurred an estimated cost of approximately $237 million from distributing DROP. Overall, the city has awarded more than $1.5 billion to municipal employees enrolled in the program. The legislation I introduced today would amend the eligibility clause for enrollment in DROP. Going forward, as of January 1st of 2019, this legislation would not allow future exempt and non-union represented employees, either hired or appointed, to participate in DROP. To be clear, the legislation does not modify eligibility for any current employees and would not alter ratified collective bargaining agreements. As our largest financial obligation, we need reforms that will improve the overall pension system. And the collective goal here is to protect everyone's financial interests, pension earners, taxpayers, and the city of Philadelphia's future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. On Saturday, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., I am happy to be opening my Southwest Philadelphia satellite office at 58th and King Session Street, Myers Annex. We will also be having a resource fair for the community, and this is a milestone in the 2nd Councilmatic District as we officially extend constituent and community services to the Southwest Philadelphia part of my district. Again, it's going to be from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. I'm going to have resources from various stakeholders and city agencies, as well as food, refreshments, and entertainment. Thank you very much, Council President.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Councilman. There being no additional speeches, we will call on Councilwoman Reynolds Brown for a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
Of course, Mr. President. I move that council stand adjourned until Thursday, September 27th, 2018 at 10 a.m.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that council stand adjourned until Thursday, September 27, 2018. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. Thank you all very much.